Hello, I'm Sharon Douglas, your host for Things You Need to Know. I have two dynamic women with me today. They just so happen to be attorneys, and they have brought a wealth of information to us. I'd like to introduce the first guest, Colette Hote, Colette and Associates. Hello, Colette.
Hello.
Colette, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you said, I'm a lawyer. I have been involved in minority and women business programs, disadvantaged business programs, for over 35 years. I work with agencies and larger prime contractors to ensure that their contracting practices are full and open and inclusive. And I also do a lot of expert witness testimony, trainings, writings, and speaking on these issues.
Thank you so much, Colette. We also have Angela Berry Roberson, who is the previous administration senior U.S. DOT advisor. Angela, tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. I, like I said, I am an attorney. However, I call myself a recovering attorney. I'm more of an advocate in this area, working in this area of civil rights for over 30 years. I would say I start when I was two. But on all different perspectives. I've worked in the public agencies. I've worked in private consultants as well as contracting. I've worked for small businesses, but all in the implementation of the program. I've only worked when I was working with the federal government recently in the Departmental Office of Civil Rights, working on the policy and supporting the office on especially the new DBE rule. Excuse me,
Thank you, Angela.
ACDBE rule. My aviation folks would get real mad about that. But
Okay,
Yeah.
I understand.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, ladies. And I must say that I've known these ladies for a number of years, and I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. Now, let's go to things you need to know. This week, there have been a lot of executive orders about DEI and DEIA. Colette, can you clarify what those documents mean or what they didn't mean?
Well, I'll try. Um, there are really three orders that it seems to me that contractors would want to pay attention to. The first one does concern quote unquote DEI, which is undefined. But basically, the Trump administration is directing agencies to immediately terminate any so-called DEIA, and the A is for accessibility. Terminate any programs, essentially zero out those offices, tell contractors who are working on these types of programs and trainings that they must immediately cease. And my understanding is that federal employees that are in those offices basically were told to go home. They're going to be put on administrative leave till the end of the month. And then we'll see. Some people may get reassigned. My guess is many of them will lose their jobs. But there is that wholesale attack on what the administration calls DEIA. There's a second executive order that repeals other executive orders, including the Environmental Justice Executive Order from 1994, some more fair employment orders from 2011, and really quite astonishingly, Executive Order 11246, which was signed by Lyndon Johnson to implement the equal opportunity requirements of Title VI to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So all those are been rolled back. And then there's also an executive order about aviation. I'm puzzled about why they singled out aviation, other than the fact that Tucker Carlson seemed very concerned about whether or not there might be Black pilots flying his planes. And so maybe that got stuck in Trump's mind somewhere. But the orders all purport to ensure that, quote unquote, our civil rights laws are followed and that everyone is hired on the basis of merit, not their gender or race or religion or sexual orientation. One thing I do want to stress to people is that these are orders that go to direct federal contracting. They do not yet apply to indirect contracting. So, for example, the Texas Department of Transportation gets money from the Federal Highway Administration. And so contracts that flow in that manner are not affected. It's just direct federal contracting at this time.
Okay. Angie, can you share your perspective on how these orders impact us as the audience?
Well, I think there's been a lot of confusion between DEI and DEIA and what most contractors and some of the owners are calling the DBE program. And I can tell you that they are not the same. They are completely different. The DBE program is a law versus a part of a method of ensuring that there is no discrimination, which have recently been called DEIA or DEI. So, as far as the impact, I think there's a lot of confusion out there. I think there's a lot of confusion with these orders out here. But the key thing is it's mostly impacting the employment situation, encouraging diverse individuals for employment. Again, the essence of the 11246, as Colette mentioned, is incredible to me, because the entire order was to address the lack of, or actually address the discrimination that was going on in the hiring practices to encourage the inclusion of all, not necessarily the inclusion of certain people. So, but as far as, the biggest impact is literally on the federal offices and the federal agencies, as Colette also said, that it has to do with those that have direct procurements, those who are in the federal offices. There is some mention, of course, with, identifying, the top federal contractors and federal, or top nonprofits and top, what did I say? Nonprofits, advocacy organizations, prime contractors. And so I know there's a lot of people. I know I've gotten tons of calls, Colette. I know you've had triple the calls that I've had.
Yeah,
regarding this matter. So right now, you can tell if it's DEIA, it's really dealing with employment, and really focused on the federal agencies and the federal contracting. That means direct, not necessarily the indirect, what we see through the grants and the capital funding that's through FAA, FTA, and FHWA.
Great. Okay. I understand, and I hope our audience understood everything that you clarified regarding DEI versus DBE. Of course, we've heard there's a difference. So you made that very clear. So Angie, since you just left the administration, what was some of the final rules that were made?
Well, the biggest one, of course, was made back in April of the last year, which is the modernization of the DBE program and the ACDB program, also called the final rule, even though it's not final. So now we call it the current rule, as it relates to the DBE program. And what that did is address some of the measurements and some of the I guess the practices that are kind of antiquated now. So like the measures of COVID are have been adopted. So you can have, virtual on-sites. You can talk about the personal net worth. It's risen extremely, not extremely, but a lot, to come in terms of what the economy is like today. There are some, of course, some certification provisions that have been streamlined to help on that, the increase of monitoring, to making sure that with the commitments that are happening, that, if you committed to it, you need to have some accountability. So there's additional aspects as it relates to that, and so many more. I mean, mostly the certification elements were addressed to bring those, kind of modernize those up into time, especially the personal net worth, which is the P and W is what we called, and increasing that for, what the current economic, is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. Somebody asked, oh, can you up it to 10 million? I'm like, come on. It was 1.8 and it went up to a significant 2.0 something.
Or
To give the so, which is a significant increase. And then again, and it also removed retirement as a basis for personal net worth, which the retirement assets, a lot of people were feeling like, and I agree, feel like that they were getting detrimentally impacted for, preparing for their future. And so I think we recognize that. And so that has been not necessarily a factor in determining your personal net worth. Interstate certification, a lot of people, even though some of these practices were in place when the rule came out back in 99 and even the updates in 2014, but they just necessarily were not emphasized or in practice. So like interstate certification is one of those. And so now with interstate certification, if you're certified in your, what used to be called a home state, now it's called the jurisdiction of original certification, or JOC, that if you are certified in one area, or at least at your original certification, then all you have to do is submit and go through a very streamlined process. And within 10 days, 10 business days, that's 2 weeks, you should be able to be certified in the following state. So instead of going through all the paperwork over and over again, and people were doing it different ways, now it's a uniform way to where if you're certified as a DBE in your JOC or in a state, then you should be able to get certified within 10 days at other jurisdictions, or at least for the DBE certification. I can't talk about all the other ones, but the DBE certification. That's just a few things that happen. But I encourage you to go to the website. There is a website to look at all the updates, and there's also trainings on board, which I encourage everybody to listen to. So
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that. Ladies, I have one other question that I'd like for both of you to touch on. We talk about the DBE program, DEI, DEIA. What about what's happening now with veterans? Can you expound on that?
Well, I can talk about that. Yes. This may be a little bit more law than people want to learn, but I have to sort of start there. Race and gender have been treated by the federal courts as inherently suspect. They're called literally suspect classifications. And so the legal standard to engage in government decision-making on the basis of race for sure, and really probably gender too, is strict constitutional scrutiny. This is the highest level of review that a federal court can apply to a statute or a program. Veteran status, on the other hand, is not a suspect classification, and therefore does not have to meet the same constitutional strictures under the 14th Amendment that race and gender-based programs do. So the veteran component of various programs really has not been subject to attack. And I do note that in one of the executive orders, I think it's the one about wasteful programs, they do specifically exempt veteran programs from these cuts, and the idea that civil rights is somehow reverse discrimination against white men and is leading to the elevation of unqualified people and contracts with unqualified contractors. So my expectation is that the veteran programs will remain intact. And the same thing might be true for disability, although of course the administration has tacked on accessibility to the term DEI. But veterans, I think veteran programs will probably be fine. And veteran programs are not civil rights programs. I think that's an important distinction. We have absolutely zero evidence that veterans are being discriminated against in contracting. I can't speak to employment, but in contracting, the many, many disparity studies that our firm has conducted, we just don't pick up any discrimination against a business or a business owner because of veteran status. So that's my expectation anyway, Sharon, is that the veteran programs will remain, even if all the rest of the civil rights programs are trashed.
Thank you so much for the input, Colette. I'm looking back at the situation of hearing from different people. I've gotten phone calls regarding veteran status, making statements such as veterans are going to take over, where DBEs are going to be kicked out. Have you ladies heard anything about this?
Well, I hear people say stuff like that, but I think it just sort of displays a lack of understanding about how this works.
Yes.
And Angela may have some other thoughts about this, but the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, and when we say DBE, what we're talking about is the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program for the United States Department of Transportation. This is a very specific statutory grant of authority to US DOT to have a race and gender-based program. Veteran status has never been a presumptive group in the DBE program. It never has. So certainly someone could always has been able to come in on an individual basis. And if you can establish to the satisfaction of the certifying agency that you have experienced systemic and continuing discrimination because you are a veteran, well, then they would have certified you as a DBE. So I think people are kind of confusing a bunch of concepts. Honestly, what I think that really is about is just a fear that, in fact, minority businesses and women-owned businesses, and quite frankly, especially Black-owned businesses, are going to be pushed out in favor of veterans who will presumably be white and male.
True.
Well, I can say it's really interesting, if I can, Sharon, I'm sorry.
Yes, please go ahead.
Is that, with the current DBE program, which is alive and well, I think everybody needs to understand that the current DBE program is still functioning as it has over the last years. And of course, impacting the new rule that we just talked about. Oh, not the new rule, but the updates of the rule. And so veterans, if they fall into, those classifications, have always been included. So, it's really interesting that, the veteran programs, and I'm not saying, and I'm proud and I thank them always for their service. But again, the only veterans that are not included in the DBE program are Caucasian males. And so, there are some states that do have the disabled veteran statuses. And so that might be a little different opposed to just a veteran program. But the DBE program is actually a small business program. Yes, there are some preferences due to historical and current status. Because right now, even in 2023, I didn't get the 2024 numbers, but the 2023 numbers, DBEs received 13.8% of the dollars. So, if you ask, 13.1% of the dollars. And so if you're really asking is, okay, so what about the other 85.9%? I mean, and those are all literally white men. So it's all about perspective, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're talking about, and let's be real about what we're talking about here. We're talking about approximately 8.1 billion for 2023. I don't know the 2024 numbers, and probably higher because of the bill funding and the IIJA money that's going in, pumping into the economy right now. And so out of the $62.2 billion that was spent in FY 2023, DBEs were awarded or committed to 8.1. So we're talking not the dollars or the extremes that I think many people are believing that, oh, all this money is going to certain classes. And then of that money, I can tell you that, again, we always talk about, race and gender. Of that, Caucasian women received over half of that.
True. That is so true.
billion. And then you start looking at the various different demographics. And I'm not trying to separate. I'm just trying to have everybody understand the consciousness of how much we're talking about here. And so we're not even talking about how can those protected classes, whether it be veterans, whether it be whomever, can get or increase their percentage of from the 86%. We're just fighting over the 13%. So yeah, I'm just it's incredible to me. But there's been talks about other classes also joining into the DBE program. But right now, the DBE program is a small business program based on a certain level of criteria. As Colette has said, if there is someone who feels that they have been discriminated against or they are disadvantaged based on a characteristics, they can always, submit documentation and join. We have, Caucasian men in the program. So it's not that it's no Caucasian men, and they can apply for the program just like anyone else.
Okay, now that we've touched on that for sure, and Colette, as one of our country's legal experts, tell us about the Kentucky MAPCO case. Just a brief
Yes.
recap.
Yes. The MAMCO case, it's Mid-America Contracting versus the United States Department of Transportation. This is a lawsuit that's been brought against the DBE program by two subcontractors. One is a milling company, the other is a trucking company located in Kentucky. And they sued Pete Buttigieg and the administrator of the Federal Highway Administration for discrimination under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. So, talk about taking something that was designed to help the descendants of slaves and turning it on its head here. And they allege that the program discriminates against them. And the district court judge, this is the trial court level we are at, agreed and held that the federal government would have to come up with identified instances of intentional discrimination against every single one of the groups that are presumptively socially disadvantaged in the DBE program, which we can have a long conversation about that, Sharon, if you think people are interested. But I guess I would submit to you that is impossible. That will not happen. First of all, I'm not sure it's true. I doubt the Federal Highway Administration has discriminated against every single one of those groups. That's not really the way the program is structured, but that's what the court held. Also attribute, I think, to the fact that federal judges don't understand anything about how contracting actually works, because he entered a preliminary injunction, but was very concerned about it being nationwide, and so limited the injunction to just these two firms and any contracts that they are, quote unquote, interested in bidding on. Well, of course, subs don't bid on contracts to DOT. They submit quotes to Prime. So, again,
That's
it's
true.
a lack of understanding of how the whole system works. But where we have ended up is that the counsel for these two firms tells US DOJ, the Department of Justice, what contracts they are interested in, and they have listed 23 states where they think they would like to work. So they are within 5 days of the advertisement of a contract in which they are, quote unquote, interested, to let US DOJ know that, which will let US DOT know that, which will let the recipient know that. And then those contracts are supposed to be pulled back and re-advertised with no DBE goal. I do know that Illinois DOT did pull a significant number of contracts off the last letting and put them back out without DBE goals. About 6 weeks ago, I think now, two other firms filed motions to intervene because, to be frank, what makes these two people so special? Why do these two subs get to decide, whether there are contract goals across the country? So I would submit to people that this is really not tenable and that eventually there are going to be enough plaintiffs so that it will cover many, many, many states. So far, they have only listed contracts that are funded by the Federal Highway Administration, although they did originally list a contract for the Indianapolis airport. So just know that the injunction would cover any U.S. DOT funded contract, regardless of who the issuing administration is. But Indianapolis decided not to use federal money on that project, so that one went away. So far, we don't have any airports or transit agents to my knowledge. But I think the point that people need to hear is that this is a coordinated, incredibly well-financed attack on the DBE program, and there will be more to come. There are attacks on other programs, including Title VI and environmental justice. There's a case that was filed by the Environmental Protection Agency against the state of Louisiana, where the court basically struck down the entire framework that we use for Title VI cases. So I want to stress what Angela said, that the DBE program is still very much alive, but people need to understand that there are forces out here who are on a mission to dismantle civil rights, whatever you want to call it, whether it's DEI, which is not civil rights in my view, but that's part of the problem, is nobody knows what DEI even means. And so it's very easy to put anything that you want on that framework and then attack it. But I think contractors just need to be aware that the world is changing, and it's changing very, very, very fast. So we can talk about that too, if you like, Sharon.
Oh, yes, for sure. And, ladies, you know where I stand. You know that I'm in the program, but I am really, again, thankful that we can reach out to an audience that have so many questions regarding these major changes that are impacting all of us. And my question is, what now? Colette, why don't you provide us your thoughts about projections and actions that our audience can expect? You just said the changes are coming, and the changes are coming fast. So what else should we expect?
Hey, Sharon, I'm so sorry.
No problem.
May I just comment on the litigation for a second? I'm so
Of
sorry.
course.
I didn't
Of
mean to
course.
stop. If that's okay, I don't want to mess up our time.
Let's move.
But as far as the litigation is concerned, I also do want to re-emphasize that what Colette has said, because I don't know. I'm just want to make sure everybody understands the essence of the thing. Even though the ruling mentioned 23 different states, that doesn't mean that the DBE program or the projects or the certifications in those states are impacted. It's only the identified projects for those plaintiffs are impacted. That's it. Everything else is business as usual. Compliance is expected. Everywhere else in Indiana, in Kentucky, in Illinois, it doesn't make any difference. So again, the impact.
Texas,
they haven't even identified a project in Texas.
Okay.
So definitely in Texas, it is business as usual. You set DBE goals where, the Department of Transportation wants to set DBE goals, or any of the transit authorities or the airports continue to operate the DBE program and the ACDBE program as according to 49 CFR Part 26, as well as 23, and the approved programs. In fact, Secretary Buttigieg sent out a letter to some key organizations in the industry to re-emphasize that before leaving office. And so I just want to make sure that everybody understands that, yes, I'm not saying sit on your laurels and just like, okay, we're good, the program is good. Heed Colette's warning. Please get ready, be prepared, understand that this might not always be the case, but it's the case right now. And that, be sure to understand that, if contractors, and I've heard this, contractors and consultants telling DBEs that we no longer need to use you because the president took away the DBE program. That is not correct. Yeah. If they say I work in the state of Texas, then that state of Texas is on that list. Therefore, I don't have to use you on that is incorrect. I think everybody just needs to understand that it is business as usual until, so they said, keep working until somebody tells you who in an authoritative mode, and you better get it in writing from your either the owner of the project, not just from your contractor, that the DBE program is no longer intact. And that should be a national wide, it might not be national wide, but definitely you can talk to the Federal Highway or FAA or FTA, the regional representatives, to ask, is this the case? As a DBE, you have a right to ask that question.
That's
So
true.
do not just assume that because. Now, if you're in the situation of proposal and they choose to make a business decision not to use you, you can get mad all you want to. You can interfere in private affairs. But if the goal is on the project and it has not been identified by those two plaintiffs, just those two plaintiffs right now, because I don't think the courts have accepted the two plaintiffs who want to join the case. I don't believe that's happened yet.
Yeah,
I don't know.
the motion to intervene is still pending. We'll see what the court does
Right.
about that. So
So-
Angela is right. Of course, the DBE program is intact and it does apply. I do have to say to people, however, that get ready for when it's gone, because you have some time, and that's the good news, is that you have some time, if you are a DBE business owner, to think about what you want to focus on in terms of shoring up your business. So, Sharon, you said what's next? Personally, what I certainly expect is tons more litigation, and who knows? I mean, the Bondi Justice Department may just decline to defend. They may. I mean, that frankly, I think today we're good on the DBE program, but this time next year we can have a conversation again, maybe, or whatever, and we'll see where we are. I have been more worried all along about what the federal courts were going to do than what the administration was going to do. Because the issue with the courts is that has a much broader reach. And yes, as we talked about at the beginning, the DBE program is statutory. But if the federal courts hold that the statute is unconstitutional, then nothing else is going to matter. Don't worry about some executive orders. So, we have been turning away from the use of race. We as a country, not me personally, certainly, but for a few years now. So, I've been telling people this. Angela's heard me say it for at least the last 3 years. Everybody get ready, because we now have a whole bunch of Trump-appointed federal judges, and we're going to get more now.
It's true.
Certainly my expectation is that he will appoint at least 2 more Supreme Court justices, maybe 3, which will cement the conservative majority on the court for another generation. So I think people just have to get real about where we are. So certainly what I'm telling DBEs and my friends who are DBEs, and me, too, although, I'm not a contractor or consultant in that way, is take a look at your business with a good hard look at where you need to improve. You need to kind of figure out how to get low, because if there's no goal, people are not going to use you. There is going to be no more premium, if there ever was one, on being a DBE. You're going to have to get your house in order. And one of the things that I'm certainly hoping is that the state DOTs and these larger agencies, properties, will really shore up their supportive services and technical assistance components, so that people have some chance to get out here in a quote unquote open market and survive. One of the things that I think we have not done a good job of in the DBE program, and I've been involved with this program since we rewrote the regs in 1999, really is helping firms to become primes, making sure that they have adequate sources of capital, that they can get bonded, that they can grow, that they have the elements that they need, and even on the consulting side. So take a look at your business. Certainly look around and see what other options there are. Where I think things are going is towards some type of small business program approach. It will be better than nothing. I do not ever want to pretend to anyone that a small business, race and gender neutral, and by that we mean a program without goals. A lot of these have kind of a technical aspect, these terms. But a fully race and gender neutral program is not going to get you the same results that the DBE program and its type have achieved. The problem is race. The problem is sex. So if you have a program that ignored those, I always say to people, it's like saying that the patient needs a triple bypass, but he doesn't have any health insurance and we can't get that for him. So we're just going to tell him lay off the McDonald's and martinis. Well, good advice, but you needed a bypass. And I think that DBEs have got to be honest with themselves about what they need to do. The other thing is keep your eye on these local programs. We've been very focused on the federal DBE program so far, but just know that there are a couple cases pending against state and local programs, both in Texas. The city of Houston has been sued over its local minority and women business program, as well as a district there. And the state of Texas has been sued over its historically underutilized business program. And of course, that's got nothing to do with Trump and his executive orders, or at least not directly. I guess I'll put it to you that way. So I think those are all things to watch out for.
And I'm glad you touched on that, Angel.
No, I was going to say that, but you're absolutely right. There are other states that have already started the pullback or the rollback, and there. I heard the state of Missouri has already done that.
Yes,
has already rolled back their MWBE programs, and so it is. I mean, there were already some race neutral states such as California and Florida, and some race neutral measures that have been used all over. And so, but if I can say what now, the key thing is, build on the relationships, because people do business with people they know, regardless of the requirements, regardless of. So one of the things I can say as a former contractor and consultant is that, if I know you and I know the work that you do, then I'm going to use you because I can relate, because it's about trust and risk. And so if you have developed that relationship with the primes that you have been working with over the years, or the ones that you develop relationships, and then that they will use you regardless, whether it be in the small business program or whatever business program that develops, in this time. We just don't know. But again, it's still all relationship based. And so it doesn't make any difference who's out there. If they know you and you can do the work with the right price, then I think it's important that you build on that relationship. And if you haven't built that relationship and you have just been, writing the DBE program or these diverse programs and saying, you got to use me like you got some kind of entitlement, that those days are over. So I'm just saying, I mean, I'm, real talk. That's real talk about from a former contractor, because if you can't get the work done, you're not going to help me any. I'm not going to have these regulations or these requirements in there. So build those relationships while you still got time. If you haven't already, build those relationships.
Let me say this. Let me say this, ladies. Right. Presently, I get calls about my title has changed. These people are running scared. And we're talking about the MWBE program. They are scared. They are losing their positions. Some folks are thinking that this is a cover-up. They are squashing the names of these individuals that are serving in this particular capacity. It's a cover-up just to hold them in position. Now, talk to us just a couple of minutes about that. What can those individuals look for?
Are you talking about like the positions that I used to serve in before I went to the federal government, which is your chief diversity officers, your
yes, ma'am,
DEI officers,
yes,
your MWBE program managers and analysts? You know what? Honestly, just keep doing what you're doing. But follow the letter of the law. Follow the letter of that's in the law right now. And if you've done what you're supposed to do, look at some, do what they have done. I have to say they, but look at what the orders say. Look at what some of the statements have said. They've talked about merit-based. They've talked about, using those that are capable, and use those words and find, and advocate for, I'm looking for those, I'm looking for that. And what you'll be surprised, there's still a lot of DBEs, most of the DBEs because they got to be overqualified to get the work that they do have.
Yeah.
Have those qualifications anyway. So it should not, just make sure your efforts are there. Now, as far as what some of the orders are saying, because it's about employment. So those are the positions that you're talking about. You know, you just make sure your leadership is there. I mean, because again, like Colette said, that's about the federal government. It's not necessarily about your local and regional and state offices. Now, what your local, but you need to check your leadership at your local, state, and regional offices, as well as those in the private sector. Where's your leadership stand?
True.
What is that? Because if there are some, have said, you know what, we understand the business case for having diverse thought and diverse contractors for either community engagement or because they've got that relationship and we trust them and we're not looking. I mean, the orders and the information talk about a colorblind. I'm colorblind. I just do the ones who know how to do the work. So those are the language. Those are the things. Stop pushing, oh, I need minority business this, or I need, women-owned business that. Just talk about the firms. Talk about, I want reliable, I want merit-based, I want, use those languages. And so, and be strong about that. Because if you think about it, the DBE program is not an entitlement program. It is, you still got to do the work. You still have to have the capability of those requirements that are in the procurement documents. That has nothing to do with the DBE program. Do you meet the criteria and the qualifications that the procurements are asking for? So as long as you're doing that, don't care what color you are. And so as advocates or in positions where you're responsible of making sure that you have the right firms in the right spots and to do those supportive services to make sure that there's capacity with the small businesses and everything like that, do that. That's what I say.
Okay.
And I don't know if I've stepped out of bounds, but
Oh no,
that,
oh no. Hey, that's why I ask you ladies to come on this show. This is real information.
yeah,
Now, from each one of you in closeout, give our audience a projection of what we're looking at. 1 year, 2 years, what is it? What do you think it is? Because we know there's nothing written. We know how the administration is going right now. My personal thoughts. Give us something that you think we should look forward to.
Well, I think it's going to vary depending on what types of programs you're talking about and what level of government and what private sector firms. Seems pretty clear to me that the Trump administration is on a mission to implement the policies and approaches that Trump has been talking about since he came down that escalator in 2016. This is nothing new. And so my expectation is that the administration essentially is going to gut the civil rights functions and civil rights programs. And that to the extent that lawsuits are filed, they are not going to defend these programs. I just don't think so. So sad to say, and I don't mean to be casual or flippant about this in any way. I'm watching my entire professional life's work fall apart in front of my face. So it is an incredibly distressing and upsetting and scary time. But that's frankly my expectation, is that at the federal level, the Trump administration will do everything that it can to roll back civil rights in the name of civil rights, no less, and to take us back to a time where women and minorities were essentially shut out of opportunities, at least as it relates to the federal government. On the state and local level, I think you're going to see a mix of things. As Angela mentioned, the state of Missouri, the governor there revoked the executive order that had established the minority business program for the state, which I actually wrote back in the 90s for them. But they never got it passed into statute, so it was very easy with a stroke of the pen, gone. States that don't want to do anything will have carte blanche to go off and drop their programs and maybe move to small business. Other communities, like my hometown of Chicago, will fight to the death to keep their programs. There is no way that the mayor of the city of Chicago is just going to go, oh, well, okay, whatever. That's not going to happen. So I think you're going to see a mix of things. I think many agencies are going to move to this type of small business, local business model. On a positive note, if I have anything positive to say about any of it, I do think that it's an opportunity for at least the public sector to do what at least some of us have been telling people to do for 30 years, which is to change its own behavior to support small businesses. The very first question I ask any new client is not, do you have a program, but it's what's your net paid turnaround time? If you tell me it's more than 45 days, I don't want to talk about your program at all, because all you're going to do is bring these people in here and bankrupt them. So, are you paying on time? Do you have ridiculous insurance requirements? Are the specifications written in a way so that they are more inclusive and different types of firms, like kind experience, those kinds of things? Are you trying to unbundle or disaggregate your contracts so that small contractors can do them? There are many tools the government has at its disposal that are not race or gender conscious to help small contractors that we should have always been doing, always. So now if we no longer are going to have the tools, so to speak, of telling prime contractors to go change their behavior, maybe we, meaning agencies, will have to change ours. On the private sector side, the private sector has always had more leeway than the government because it's not subject to the 14th Amendment requirements. I'm hoping that some of the private sector firms will step up their efforts. But I do have to tell you that Meta last week apparently sent out some kind of a memo to all its contractors telling them to stop collecting race and gender-based data, stop enforcing any type of MWBE commitments in its contracts. So that didn't take but a hot minute there. But there are others like Costco, bless their hearts, that have really stepped up. So I'm hoping the private sector will try to do more and that we'll get better supportive service programs, which we should have been doing all the time.
Thank you, Colette. Angie?
What she said. No, okay, I do have something to say, but really, honestly, I mean, really, like I said, doing what Colette said, I think is very important. I do think it's going to be a mixed bag, from somebody who's worked all over the country, similar to Colette, but actually implementing and enforcing these programs because of contracts my companies that I worked for had. I think it all depends on the owner, on what they think. So it really is going to be that's going to be crazy because it's going to be a hodgepodge, because you got to check yourself not only at the county line, like we do here in Dallas Fort Worth area between Tarrant County and Dallas County, but we've got to check ourselves literally at the door. I mean, literally, what door am I walking in? Oh, okay, it's CTA in Chicago. Okay, do my hat change. Okay, where am I walking in now? Oh, I'm walking in, South Dakota. Okay, switch my hat. So and I'm not saying one way or another, but everybody's going to have their own policy on how they're implementing these programs. And so we got to be, as DBEs, as prime contractors, y'all got to be ready to, I hate to say code switch on whatever entity that you're going to. But as far as what needs to be done, and I've already said it before, I still believe the number key element of business is relationships. And I think is absolutely key, not only relationships, but even more so the capacity and the capabilities. And as Colette has said, those supportive services programs, use those. There's tons out there for small businesses that everyone and anyone can use, regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, or national origin. So, definitely, emphasize on those programs, and again, I say use the terminology that is in the orders, because, civil rights is civil rights, and that's for all. We've always talked about getting, not a fair share. Now I can't remember my own rules, because this is my, and I like Colette, this is my life work. And a lot of people said, okay, Angie, now that you have left, what are you going to do? Are you going to become an attorney again? No offense, Colette.
Not all it's cracked up to be.
but honestly, and I'm like, you know what? I have been a civil rights advocate for years, ever since I got out of law school. And so it's in me, not, picking one people over the other, but for the service of all, so everyone can, level the playing field, and making sure that everybody has access to the opportunities in transportation. And so I think, I will be a lone read, but I think I got another weed with me, read with and Colette, and so many others that are, pushed to, what do I do? What do I not do? I mean, there is a community of us, and I think there's more than you think of us who understands. It might be in pockets, I believe this, but not this. I believe in that, but not this. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just this for the betterment of all people, and all have access to the opportunities, especially in transportation, but not just transportation, in your municipal work, in any public work. We pay taxes. We want a piece of that pie. And so,
Yes.
and utilizing the systems. But like I say, I'm going to say this one more time. The time of entitlement is over. Do not feel because you are one way, another way, regardless of your race, gender, or creed, that you are entitled to anything. It is going to take, and I quote, hard work and capable, I'm just reading from the order, on what to do. So
well, and let me jump in here with one last sort of thought for people, in terms of what folks might do. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's a disappointment to me all these years is how few joint ventures I see between DBEs trying to work together. I watch the very large primes bid against each other. We're talking about international companies, and then they'll join up when they need to.
Yes.
To go get that work. That is something we have not done a good job of. And I mean, we being a DBE myself, have not done a good job of that. So here's your chance. Okay. You got a little bit of time. Mm-hmm. Think about who I can talk to that I know in my business, in my industry, in my trade, whatever it is, that I can work with, so that maybe we can join together, so that we can increase our capacity to do more work, because we're going to be the only people helping each other, honestly. So we better get it together here. No more crabs in a barrel, folks. Those days got to be over.
I truly, truly agree. I truly agree. Ladies, this has been great.
Thank you.
I surely hope this is not the last time I see you guys.
Well, so no, I look forward.
You know better. Okay.
Well, things are changing. We know things are changing. We also know that we need to come back together and talk about the changes that are happening, maybe 2 weeks down the road, or whatever the case may be. But you guys have my number. You know that when the changes are happening, and when the button is hot, we've got to push it. So please, be open to that phone call.
Yeah, because communication is really key. As this is a fast moving, and there's misinterpretations out there, and those misinterpretations not addressed blow up. So I think it's absolutely to be best informed about what is real and what is not.
Yes.
And I'll leave it
at that. Invite us back, and we'll let you know. I mean, we're this is all we do all day, every day, is talk about this. So
well, I so much appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
And you got it from the mouths of two dynamic women. They're attorneys. So I'm Sharon Douglas, your host for Things You Need to Know. We look forward to seeing you next time. Welcome to Things You Need to Know live with our Q&A session. We have our guests, Colette Holt with Colette & Associates, and Angela Berry Roberson, former senior advisor to the U.S. DOT. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
I am so glad you guys are here. Now, for our audience, if you have questions, please put those questions in the chat. Woo, I guess we do have questions, ladies.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to join us as far as asking questions, please put them in the chat. You must subscribe to the channel in order to use the chat room. Couple of seconds here. I hope you enjoyed the presentation by these two dynamic women. They've given us some thoughts for future, and we look forward to hearing from them again. Ladies, do you have anything else to add to what you gave us on the show?
Well, I can give a little bit of a legal update from what was that, Thursday? In the case against the U.S. Department of Transportation's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, the DBE program that we discussed, this Mid-America case filed by these two white-owned companies, there has been a motion to intervene by several minority and women-owned groups that I guess got filed on Tuesday, maybe Monday or Tuesday. It finally showed up in PACER, which is the federal court system where you can go look up different cases. So that motion is pending. So we now have cross motions to intervene from other white contractors as well as these minority contractors. So stay tuned for that. The court has set a briefing and trial schedule because it is a preliminary injunction that's been entered. So we don't have any kind of final resolution there. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to keep watching that one really quite regularly, probably at least a couple of times a week, to see what the judge does in terms of allowing folks to intervene. I assume on some type, at least for the MBE groups, on some type of third-party beneficiary theory, that they are the intended beneficiaries of the program and therefore have a right to sue. I just have to tell people, this may be more law than people want to hear, but third-party interventions under that kind of a theory are usually a long shot, but worth definitely trying. We'll see. So let's keep our eyes on that one. But the trial is now scheduled for January of 2026. So we'll see what happens with the new Justice Department coming in, because they are in fact in charge of this case for the federal government. The other thing is that we still don't have any answer filed in the case against the state of Texas for the historically underutilized business program. Defendant Greg Abbott is technically the defendant, represented by Ken Paxton's office, and they have asked for additional time to file an answer, which was granted. So nothing quite happening there yet, but I will definitely be monitoring those as well.
Clay, thank you so much for the update. You see how things are changing? I mean, we just were here a few days ago. And as I said, it's always going to be a hot button. And when it's ready to push, I need you ladies to push it to us. We do have a question. I'm going to ask my producer to read that question. We're getting comments, ladies, instead of questions. We're getting thank yous for presenting the information. We have Andrea Hollingsworth. Can you see those on your channels?
Well, we can see Sheena. Hi, Sheena.
Hey, Sheena. Yeah.
We appreciate all of you joining us. There's Sheena. Andrea's on also, ladies. Mark is on.
Of course.
The usual suspects.
Yes. Which is good.
It is good.
Yeah, because they need to reinforce what they have always known.
Oh, Andrea, hi.
Yes.
Somebody ask us a question.
Yes, please.
And otherwise, I'm going to talk about the probably illegal order that was issued, apparently coming mostly from Musk, that people could resign and remain in their positions until September 30th, be paid up until that point and resign. And they have, I think, about a week to decide whether or not to take this offer, or they can stay and kind of see what happens. So we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see with that.
Colette, we would love to hear that. Let's take Andre McEwen's question
Mhm.
first.
Right.
First, he says, thank you. What will the operational impact on certification agencies? What will be this impact?
Well, that I'm aware of, no. The court case is not about the agencies or the certification process. So the certification process will, stay in line with 49 CFR Part 26, especially with, implementing the several aspects of the final rule or the current rule that was done and launched in April and effective May 9th of last year. So just be sure to follow those to the letter of the law. If there's guidance available on that website. I believe it's transportation.gov / DBE final rule. You just need to follow those. So impacts, none. Just go ahead and be compliant to the letter of the law. 49 CFR Part 26 and ACDBE for Part 23.
Angie, would you repeat that and just slow it down a minute so our
Right.
audience can get it?
So what part?
With the letter of the law starting.
Yes. No. The impact on certification agencies based on the orders or the litigation at this point there is no impact. You just follow the letter of the regulation, which is 49 CFR Part 26 for the DBE program and 49 CFR Part 23 for the ACDB program. But please be mindful, there were a number of certification changes and modifications with the rule that was launched back in April and May of 2024. So please be conscious of how that impacts your certification agencies and your processes and procedures. So, but as far as the litigation and the orders, no impact, but definitely the rule.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is, sort of looking down the barrel of the gun here, so to speak, is that if, maybe when, but if agencies are no longer going to be allowed to set contract goals, the utility of being a DBE will be vastly reduced. Now, let's assume for a moment that the supportive services components of the programs continue, that you can get help to run your business and increase your business capacities. That would be a reason to remain a certified DBE if those are things that interest you. But I don't think we should kid ourselves that if there are no contract goals, the utility of remaining certified in the program will be vastly reduced. And so one of the things that we may see coming over time, and I think it's going to take a while, but may be less support for certification agencies and their staffs if their workload starts to drastically go down. I certainly hope that people will stay certified in the program. We need those numbers. The other side's played the long game very well, let's be honest. But that means that we're going to have to start playing it too. And that means that I still need data to be able to work with. So it might be a few years, but if nobody's collecting any data and nobody's getting certified, I'm not going to have anything to work with if we want to try and make an argument about the fact that discrimination still exists and that some type of remedial intervention into the market failure of discrimination is supportable. So I'm hoping people stay in the program, but I can imagine there will be people who say, you know what? A lot of paperwork, a lot of headache for no benefit to me. So hopefully people will stay in.
We do have another question from Andre, ladies. Do you see certification agencies shifting to DBE, ACDBE, DBE only if MWBE programs go away?
Well, let me jump in here for a second, because there is this, I think, mistaken understanding out there in the world that what letters you give these programs matter from a constitutional standpoint. They do not. An MBE program could be called the DBE program. Same thing, different label. So I don't honestly think this question is sort of real, in the sense of, it's not as if you had an MBE program and you're legally threatened, so you're going to move to a DBE program. That doesn't do anything from a legal standpoint. The standards are the same, regardless of whether or not you call your program an MBE program, or a hub program, or an emerging business program, or a DBE program. Federal judges are not fooled by what label you put on something.
But you do have to be conscious of, the MWB programs and the local programs are run by or governed by the local statutes or ordinances, versus a DBE program, which is statutory and related actually really to DOT, the Department of Transportation, federal funding. So you have to be conscious of that, because I think, as we mentioned in the program, there are some states that have, not necessarily eliminated, but actually eliminated programs. Programs, but that's because that state or local or regional laws that did that. So, and I, like Colette was saying, again, changing the names, that doesn't necessarily make any difference. But if you're saying if the MWB programs go away, will they flock to the DBE programs? That could happen. So you'll have additional DBE and ACDBE participation, but you still got to meet the standards of those individual, and they are separate individual programs. Like, there's an LBE program or a service disabled program. I mean, all the programs have their own, governance. So you have to make sure that that works one way or the other. Certification, I mean, again, it follows whatever is the process that regulates that. So you just have to be careful. Make sure you don't mix them, because they're different programs. They are not the same program. There's not a mishmash. It is separate programs. So I actually have some heartburn, I'm not going to say, of local programs calling themselves DBE programs, because, it's really not the DBE program. Granted, you call it whatever you want to, but just make sure what that description is and what that really means. There's only one DBE program, and that's a DBE program.
Well, but Andy, let me jump in here a second, because I think this is where some of the confusion comes. And of course, you come from the federal side in that sense, but there are a lot of local programs that call themselves DBE programs. And I personally think that's a good thing, because they are at least focusing on disadvantage, as opposed to some local and state programs that have no disadvantage component at all, where you're just a minority or a woman, and that's kind of good enough. So the terms get confusing. But what I want people to be clear about is that the constitutional standards are the same, regardless of what level of government is applying it, and regardless of what label you might want to put on your program.
And that's true. I'm only talking about the federal side of the DBE rules, and I know there's other DBE programs, but I just think that you need to be clear on which DBE program you're working with.
Yep.
And there lies some confusion, but I just think whatever contract you're working with, whatever program you're working, whatever entity you're working with, make sure you understand the definitions and the qualifications of that program. That's what I mean. But yeah.
Okay, ladies, we have another question.
Yes.
Will the DBE contracts that are already in effect be honored? This is coming from Carolyn.
Well, probably. I mean, you have an existing agreement. I'm not sure there'd be much of an argument for saying, well, some future relief struck something down, and so therefore it's backwards looking. One of the things to keep in mind is that in the DBE case, all they were looking for is injunctive relief, which is forward looking. They didn't name any contracts. They didn't make any argument that existing contracts should be obviated or otherwise modified. So my expectation is that if you have an existing contract that is in performance now that has a DBE component to it, DBE goal on it, a US DOT DBE goal, to be very clear, that will continue.
Okay, we have another question, and this is from Tracy. I believe she's saying, I want to confirm that DBE is still business as usual in the private sector.
I mean, she said DEI. Does she mean DEI or DBE?
Correction, Angie. It is DEI.
DEI.
No.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, presumably, Trump's executive orders only go to direct federal contracting, so they wouldn't have any effect on any private sector, quote unquote, DEI initiatives. That said, however, there is a provision in one of them that directs agencies to come up with a list of 9 private sector, quote, DEI programs that should be evaluated for potential review and litigation by the federal government. And one of the things to just, I know it's a frustration Angie shares, which is sort of this conflation of DEI with civil rights and DBE, because the DBE program and the MWB programs are remedial race-conscious programs. They are not DEI. I'm not even sure what DEI is half the time. And I think this is a very vague term that people have been able to hang anything that they want to on it. So I'm not sure that the Trump people know what it is either. I hate to be so blunt, but I think for them, it's a synonym for anything that involves Black and brown people. Doesn't matter what it is. That's really what they're talking about. And they use DEI because that's a term they latched onto. So, but otherwise, no. I mean, private sector firms are standing up for their quote unquote DEI programs, many of them. Others are abandoning them, which strikes me as much more of a political question than anything else.
Okay, we have another one. Oh, this looks like a familiar person.
Yeah, hi.
Okay, what impact could this have to workforce goals and reporting?
Well, I can tell you that, of course, one of the executive orders that was revoked was 11-246, which is incredible. It's been on the books for, 60s, 70 years. And that, of course, created the OFCCP and some of the workforce goals and reporting that are done in that area. However, there's still the EEO Act. So there is still responsibility, and there's still Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Will it have an impact on the reporting? I believe that it will, as it relates to, some of the forms, the 1390, I think it's 99 and 98 forms. Yes, it will. Because from what I understand from the final rule, from the executive orders, and Colette, please jump in and let me know if I'm right on this, is that you don't have to do it and it will not be enforced. But that doesn't mean that if your company chooses to continue to get those information, because you need to know who your populations are, you're still doing community engagement. If you're doing a project in the middle of an area you need to know, and you're trying to encourage workforce of those constituents, then collecting those numbers and that data could be reported. So, but you don't necessarily have to report it. Now, Colette, help me if I'm wrong on that. Because
no, that's right. That's right. You can still collect information if you want. Whether or not there'll be any reporting mechanism to the new Department of Labor, I don't know. I would think eventually not. If you have a current contract that has requirements in it, those are now contractual and covenants of performance. So presumably you would still have to do those. So this all seems to be more forward looking. But people just need to contemplate the fact that Executive Order 11246 was signed by Lyndon Johnson in 1965. And nobody had thought that that was in play. And so one of the things that I've been saying to people for a while now, which is very distressed, I mean, so this is just all depressing. I'm sorry. I mean, what can I tell you? Is that in some ways we are worse off than we were before the George Floyd protests, because nobody thought 11246 was in play. After 60 years and everybody been doing, everybody knows what to do in the contract and blah, blah, blah. Nobody was thinking about that. And so now they have gone after bedrock pieces of the civil rights legislation and structure from the 60s, things that came in place during the Johnson administration, during the Nixon administration. And so they have gone all the way back to that. And it just leaves me speechless, honestly.
Okay, ladies, we have Johnny that have asked a question. First of all, he says, thank you, because supplier diversity contains the word diversity. It gets treated as DEI. Do you have suggestions as far as how to approach the difference in our, I'm looking at the camera and I'm having flashes here, in our roles? The words were being blocked out.
Yeah. Well, I can say that DEI, the terms that I think that have come up over the last 5-6 years, are really terms as it relates to HR and the workforce, and employment, and making sure there's a diverse workforce in an internal company, the internal workforce. Some of that DEI information has rolled over into the external, but it's usually an internal phase, whereas supplier diversity is definitely external. Now, you ask, is there any, what can I do to, make the differences clear? I've heard contract equity. I've heard, still got the E in there. But I to make it distinctively different, and you just have to reinforce that, of course, with your internal folks, to letting them know that, DEI is an employment. I mean, you can read the orders and they talk about employment. They mention contracting, but really, it's not. But it depends on how your company is interpreting that. And so as a supplier diversity expert in your companies, it would behoove you to making sure that they understand the distinctive difference, and that you're really working with procurement, not necessarily working with HR, and stressing it that way. Again, terms are terms, and people have been real loose with that DEI term for these last few years. So it's going to be hard, unfortunately, to kind of backtrack, but do what you can. If you got supplier diversity, keep pushing supplier diversity. Now, it still might be encompassed in some of this stuff, but I can do is try your best. And there are a number, look at best practices of other people, or not necessarily best practices, but look at other colleagues and what they're calling those departments, and see if you can piggyback on that. That makes it less aligned with DEI. But, again, I'm not trying to, DEI is not bad. You know what I'm saying? But I'm just saying, in this nature where we are right now, just stress the supplier diversity, and on the supplier side more so, understand the diversity side, because you're still going to do what you need to do anyway. They're just words.
Yeah, although you know what? Personally, I changed the name.
I changed the name too.
I changed the name. Business opportunity, I kind of like.
Yeah.
Everybody likes opportunity, and God knows these people love business. So maybe think about that, or business support, or some other thing that's kind of vague and doesn't sound like it involves minorities and women.
Right.
That probably would be helpful. I think the other thing to think about is, in your own organization, have people been sloppy in lumping together anything that has to do with race and calling it DEI? So I will give you a live example. Some of you may have seen this. It happened basically over the weekend, that the Air Force basic training down here in San Antonio at Lackland Air Force Base had taken out a film about the Tuskegee Airmen and the WASPs, who were the women flyers in World War II, because it was seen as DEI. And I have to be honest, I take particular offense at this because my father was an airman. And you can see there's Daddy right there on the wall in his flight suit. So I was just appalled. So this broke in San Antonio, and then it went viral. And the new Secretary of Defense, Hegseth, said, we're on it. And then it was maliciously done or some nonsense like that. What had happened, apparently, was that the film was in a module that was in some kind of HR DEI module. And this is what I mean about being sloppy, is that airmen have nothing to do with DEI. That should be in the history lesson. And so DEI has kind of become this place where we put anything having to do with Black people and probably brown people too. So if you are in an organization, try to tease out of the DEI label the stuff that shouldn't have been there in the first place. Well, they've now apologized and the film is back in, but the fact that it even happened, and I don't think it was somebody maliciously trying to make the Trumpers look bad. I think it was some poor Air Force guy. It was in the DEI module, and so he took it out. So we have to be very careful and vigilant about that.
We have another question from Andre. Is there legal assistance, resource, partial availability for MWBE firms that may need legal representation and are awarded prime contracts as an MWBE that may risk an award change?
Well, no, I mean, there's no legal group out there that's designed to, represent MWBEs. That, depending on what kind of contract it is, might frankly just be more just a straight up contract dispute. So you'd have to need to find a lawyer who, in your jurisdiction, that handles contract disputes, preferably if it's government, somebody who has some experience. There are lots and lots of lawyers, particularly in DC, that are very familiar with the federal acquisition regulations and all of that kind of stuff. But I don't know, Angie, if you're aware, but I'm not aware that there's any legal services organization out there that would be handling MWBE issues for contractors.
Well, no, I'm not aware of course, the DBE program. I keep going back to federal. I don't mean to. There are federal highway. There's the supportive services. It's not necessarily legal. It's just helps.
That wouldn't be legal. If you're looking for a lawyer, they can't help you.
Right. What I'm saying is not legal. I mean, it's just supportive services. Again, and you got to remember the onus is what I can say is sometimes on those businesses. If you're going to set up a business like, Colette or Sharon or what I might have to, but I'm just saying you need to have a good lawyer.
Yes.
Don't necessarily always rely. I mean, when I was talking about entitlement, I wasn't necessarily being nasty about it, but a lot of times, small businesses and these programs become crutches. And opposed to the steps that they're supposed to be. But you've got to put skin in the game. I know not necessarily just your technical skills, but your administrative skills. And one of those is getting a good accountant and getting a good lawyer. So and not a family lawyer. I mean, do a lawyer who understands the work that you're going to do. Yeah. So I'm not sure, and I agree. I don't necessarily know of a resource, especially legal, but get a good lawyer so they can read your contracts. Get a good lawyer who has your best interest in heart. Is it a cost? I mean, you cost to go on a golf tournament and some banquets. You can pay money to an attorney, good attorney to do. I'm not being facetious. I'm being very honest.
No, that's real, Angie. That's real.
Very
Let me
real.
make a comment to that. That's real. Yeah. I had some situations going on, and I had a friend of mine tell me, you need a bulldog. And believe me, I went out and got a bulldog.
Mm-hmm.
So Andre has also made a statement that he was once supplier diversity manager, and his title changed to business development manager.
That's a good one.
Great.
That's a good one.
So that took that diversity out there for sure. And Andre and I have continuous conversations regarding this. The other thing I would say is, ladies, have you heard anything about NCTRCA and the status of NCTRCA's future?
Not a word, no.
I haven't.
No, but I will say this, that it does seem to me that the private sector certifying programs like NMSDC, National Minority Supplier Development Council and its affiliates, and then WBENC, the Women's Business Enterprise National Council and their affiliates, particularly need to stay on top of these issues, because most of the government agencies won't take those certifications, because they don't have what's required for, and that's been the law for 25, 30 years, that you need to be a socially and economically disadvantaged individual, and the firm needs to be small, and those certifications don't have a size restriction or any kind of type of personal net worth test that I'm aware of. Now, maybe there are some, and I just don't know. But those agencies, I think, really need to be thinking about what their pivot is going to be, because if the private sector's firms are abandoning their business diversity, supplier diversity, whatever you want to call it, programs, then there'll be much less need for those certifications. Same thing to the point originally about what's the impact on certification. Well, if there's no benefit to being in the program, obviously people aren't going to go get certified. So I think those are issues that they're going to need to deal with from a business plan itself. I mean, we all have got to evaluate our own business plans now. And that's true of all three of us that are on this screen.
Right.
This isn't just something I'm telling somebody else to do. This is something I'm doing in my own practice, in my own family, budgeting, figuring out where work is going to come from. We are all impacted by this, all of us.
And Andre pointed out also, ladies, the SCTRCA. I think, Andre, we can actually put that in the same category with NCTRCA.
Same thing. But here's the other thing that you have to understand. Those certification agencies work in place to assist public entities on doing certifications for them. So in the lieu of or absence of, I'm not saying absence to mean that, but any issues with the certification agencies, you need to go back to the public agencies that rely on those to determine what does that mean. They also do the DBE program. I can tell you that TxDOT is responsible for the DBE program. So if something happens to those agencies, it's still the responsibility of TxDOT to ensure that DBE certifications happen. If they have to restructure the UCP or for the state or whatever, that is the case. So, and in NCTRCA, you got the city of Dallas, you got the city of Fort Worth, you got the counties, so you need to go back and see what those certifications are going to be for those entities to see. But as far as a whole or what happened, that is up to the individual boards and issues that are going on with the agencies themselves, both NCTRCA and SCTRCA.
Well, ladies, we have come to the end of our questions. And to the audience that hung in here with us this time and gave us your questions, we appreciate you very much. We look forward to seeing you on the next show with these ladies giving us updates on what's happening out there. We know changes are happening swiftly, and I'm quite sure these attorneys will keep us abreast of the situation. Ladies, anything else to say before we close?
Stay strong.
Yep. Stay strong and vigilant. Just do what you got to do. Just keep business as usual right now, but don't be blindsided. Be aware of your surroundings. Stay on the news, hear what's going on, but don't get, wrapped up in the rhetoric. Understand what is really applicable and what that really means and impacts. And if you don't have questions, you can, contacted all of us, I think, on LinkedIn, in making sure that if you have any questions, we'll be sure to do what we can. But going to the owners of those contracts is probably your best benefit. I mean, your best place to go. Unless you are the owner, then you call us. Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've
All
heard
right.
it right here
Yep.
on Things You Need to Know with Colette Holt and Angela Berry Roberson. Thanks again, ladies. Next time.